this week's NFV-SDN Reality Check, we will look at some of the top news stories over the past week, as well as speak with Oracle Communications about orchestration progress and its importance for NFV.
Today's episode is brought to you by Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.net.
Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV-SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News. We'll start off the show by looking at some of the top news stories of the past week. This week, the Linux Foundation continued its push in support of open source standards, announcing an online training course targeting OpenStack software. The training course, dubbed OpenStack Administration Fundamentals, is said to be a self-paced course designed to help prepare for the OpenStack Foundation's Certified OpenStack Administration exam. The Linux Foundation noted the course is similar to the existing Essentials of OpenStack Administration course, but offered online and a move to lower costs and increased student accessibility. The online course is priced at $499. That course is set to begin January 19th, with students allowed up to 1 year to complete the coursework, with the next certification exam scheduled for the second quarter of next year. The Linux Foundation said the move was necessary as accelerated adoption of OpenStack has resulted in a shortage of qualified OpenStack administrators. Also this week, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises announced a deal with Microsoft to use the software giant's Azure platform as a preferred public cloud partner for HPE customers, and in turn having HPE serve as preferred infrastructure and services provider for Microsoft's hybrid cloud offerings. The collaboration is set to include the introduction of a hyperconverged system integrating hybrid cloud capabilities under the HPE Hyperconverged 250 for Microsoft's Cloud Platform System standard. The platform is set to provide Azure services to data centers, including self-deployment of Windows and Linux workloads. It taps Azure services for backup and disaster recovery and uses HPE's OneView for Microsoft System Center for an integrated management platform across all system components. The two companies are also working on establishing HPE Azure centers for excellence in Palo Alto, California and Houston, designed to support hybrid cloud services. HPE said it will also certify an additional 5,000 Azure cloud architects to extend its enterprise service offerings. HPE last month was split off from Hewlett-Packard, taking on the hardware giant's servers, storage, software, and network gear businesses. The newly thinned HPE maintains the company's personal computer and printers business. That move resulted in tens of thousands of job cuts. A recent report from IDC found HP at the end of the second quarter was a worldwide market share leader in the server business, garnering 25.4% of the $13.5 billion market. Microsoft in October announced a hybrid cloud solution agreement with Dell that calls for a modular Dell infrastructure to include Microsoft Cloud Platform System software and Azure services. Well, I recently had a chance to speak with Chris King, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Oracle, to talk a bit about progress being made in terms of orchestration deployment and development and the importance of those for NFV deployments. Let's take a look at the interview now. Today we are speaking with Chris King, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Oracle, to talk a bit about the NFV-SDN space. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Appreciate the time.
Great. Well, obviously, Oracle has been pretty deep inside of the NFV and SDN space when it comes to the telecom world for years now. It seems like not a week goes by where we don't get a press release from you guys about some new advancement, orchestrations, NFV, something like that. So you guys are definitely very aggressive in the space. Great to get some good insight from you guys on the topic. So maybe start off with, I guess, what's the general view from Oracle on, I guess, the development pace of NFV and SDN and these platforms when it comes to, I guess, for mobile operators, what they're looking for in the marketplace? What's been, I guess, your general view of the pace of development?
I think it's dangerous to try to oversimplify it. The market, trying to characterize the entirety of the market as a single entity.
We're the media. We like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's a simple way to go, but the reality is you've got both geographic differences as well as individual country differences and differences in individual company strategies. So I'd say in general, to break my own rule, there are certainly a number of companies that have been very aggressive in this space and are moving quite rapidly. Others are taking the more traditional telco route of being a fast follower. Mm-hmm. And then there are some areas where, NFV is still very much a, something that's talked about, but no action has actually even been taken yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess as you look at the development maybe of the platforms themselves, I mean, obviously, when it comes to the IT and the data center space, I mean, they've been using these types of technologies for years and years. They're very comfortable with them. But as it relates to the telecom industry, which is it's still a little bit new to this, how do you see the development of the platforms being able to support what telecom operators are looking for in terms of of what these things can provide to their operations? Are you seeing pretty good support or pretty good development along those lines?
Well, I'm certainly seeing a lot of really cool progress in that area. The technology using virtualization in the network is not a new concept. Mm-hmm. We've been here at Oracle, we've had products running in the network for nearly a decade now, running on virtual machines. So this is not a new concept. It's something that, as we move to NFV, it's a formalization of this. It's it's an expansion of these concepts. But in terms of the basic concept of doing virtualization, not new. What we are seeing is more the broad-based platform and really the standards starting to formalize and shape up. And I think that's really been the big breakthrough over the last 2 or 3 years. Has really been an increased understanding across the industry of where we're going to end up, and the standards starting to really emerge and take hold, allowing us to really move to a best-of-breed kind of model.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's a good point, because a lot of the companies I talk to who have been in the space for a while, obviously Oracle, and a lot of the companies coming from the IT and data center space, you're right. I mean, they're very comfortable with what's happening here. You guys have been working with it for a long time. So yeah, to you, it's, again, kind of old hat. Then I talked to some of the more legacy telecom hardware vendors, and for them, obviously they've had to change their whole business models and are, looking at this as a new thing. So you're right. It is. I guess there are two different ways to kind of look at where we are in terms of the development of this. But you bring up a good point there. I mean, obviously the standards issue it has been an ongoing theater, I guess, when it comes to all this, because again, Etsy working on things, there's different organizations working on different types of standards. And I know, at least from the telecom space, operators are very big on standards. They like to know that they're deploying something that down the road will have support, that they can kind of plug and play in different vendors to make it all work together. I guess as you look at that part of it, the standards part of it, do you think good progress in terms of getting to a point where the telecom industry is getting more comfortable with where we're going in terms of NFV and SDN platforms?
Yeah, I definitely think the standards have really started to mature. If anything, now the challenge is we have a few too many standards organizations participating. But I think that'll rationalize out, and we'll get to the right balance here over the next year. We're seeing some organizations that have traditionally been more in the OSS BSS side of things also coming to play in this area, which I think will be helpful in the long run. We're particularly excited by the TM Forum and their Zoom initiative, which is looking at, in many ways, the operations side of NFV. Fundamentally, our belief is that NFV represents both a network transformation with orchestration and the VNFs, as well as a business transformation with the integration of the OSS environment into the orchestration side of things, and bringing all that together into a common framework. And both are going to be necessary for success.
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, there are a lot of organizations working on this, and I'm sure, from the outside looking in, it seems like, kind of like what you said. I mean, there's maybe too many working on this type of thing. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of pieces of the pie that are getting sliced pretty thin, because again, these are, very in-depth technologies that, you got to make sure that things are working correctly. But it does seem like at times that, we are kind of working on such small slices of this that hopefully everybody does, at the end of the day, see the big picture, and at the end of the day, make sure these things all kind of work together. Does it seem like, from your point of view, that the industry itself is working well together to make sure that even though there are these, people looking at different slices of this, that they are looking at that big picture, and that at the end of the day, when an operator plugs these platforms in, that they are going to be fairly seamless in their operations with each other?
Yeah, I think we're headed in the right direction there. It started off with, of course, the original initiative and the white paper, and that sort of exploded into as one of my customers calls it, the alphabet soup of standards. But we're starting to see that consolidate, starting to see that come back together. The standards bodies are starting to work together now. The biggest concern that I have is that we haven't seen the depth of standard that we've had in this area from the IT side of things, where when we specify standards on the IT side of the business, around cloud and a lot of these initiatives, there's a lot better work done in terms of providing testing frameworks, providing formal specifications that are truly compilable. Mm-hmm. And so that really gets you a lot closer to interoperability. Well, an example of this would be the browser wars. When we started off with browsers, nearly 20 years ago now, basically websites were written for individual browsers. And now if you look at HTML5, that's what people write to, is the standard of HTML5, and the various browser manufacturers implement that standard. I mean, when was the last time you downloaded a new browser and it didn't work with virtually every website you went to?
If I did, I immediately deleted it, that's for sure.
Right, you go on to the next browser.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we need to get to. That's a bit of a simplistic example, but it's where we need to get to with NFV, is that same level of standards where we have testing kits, the compatibility kits that are available as part of the standard, where you have the interfaces specified at a low enough level that the vendors can interoperate properly. And that just takes time and maturation of the standards.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is that a timing issue, just because of the fact that there are still a lot of operators perhaps who are kind of still on the outside looking in, kind of, maybe the fast followers or even just on the sidelines at this point? Or is it just a matter of everybody, I guess, working together in a cohesive manner? Because, it's always tricky when you try to get different companies working together on a single project. Everybody wants to have their piece of the intellectual property pie and things like that. So is it just a timing issue, or is it just a kind of a collaboration issue?
I think it's really both. I mean, I'm not sure how you separate one from the other.
Sure.
But in many ways, when you go back at the IMS standard, which has been around now for, 15, 20 years, it took a number of years for some of those major interfaces to get specified to the point where there was true interoperability. I think about the ISC interface, which is used between the telco app server and the CSCF. The early implementations of ISC were, completely not interoperable. And so it took, probably 5 years for that standard to stabilize to the point where you could plug and play a telco app server from one vendor with a CSCF from another vendor. Getting to that point in NFV is going to be an important sort of measuring stick for the industry.
Got it. Is I guess the level of comfort, just being comfortable, I guess, with the platforms, is that I guess a challenge for the telecom space from what you guys are seeing? Because obviously, telecom operators are very used to working with specific hardware, and they've got this legacy mindset. They've got all these, they spent a lot of money in the past on equipment that they're used to how it operates, and if something goes wrong, they know how to fix it. Is it a challenge to, I guess, get that comfort level into the operator's mindsets, where they're I guess willing to let software kind of run a lot of these things that they're used to doing on their own? I mean, it does seem like it's kind of a legacy issue perhaps that needs to be, I guess, change of a mindset there.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural challenge, and to some extent I see that reflected when I talk to the vendors. To the CSPs. As I mentioned earlier, you see them in different stages of the process. And when you talk to the ones that are the furthest along, they tend to be the ones who have already started the cultural adaptation of moving to where software and hardware become two separate decisions, and the virtual machine becomes the separator, the hypervisor. Mm-hmm. And so once we get to that stage, there's going to be some training and some skill sets that need to be developed in the operators to operate these networks. If you think about it, guys are going to put down their tool belt and they're going to pick up a keyboard.
Yeah, and I talked to some of these operators, and that's been a little bit of the concern issue, is that, you've got the operations guys who are used to, how things work, and if something, if a light goes off somewhere, they kind of know what it means. But then at some point here, these things are going to be turned over to a virtualized platform, and that first weekend or whatever it's going to be when they first kind of flip the switch on something, there's always this concern that on a Saturday night or first thing in the morning, something goes wrong, lights are flashing, people are freaking out. Who do they call? Who's in charge of this platform? It does seem like there is that kind of a, I guess, mindset change that I guess they need to get comfortable with what's coming down the road, because it is. It does seem like this virtualization move it's going to happen. It's just a matter of timing and the pace of the different operators and moving down these roads, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think the virtualization thing is as big of a challenge for the operators as the orchestration side of things.
Yeah.
The virtualization, if you look at telcos around the world, normally it's either a bank or a telco that has the largest data center in the country. Mm-hmm. And they've been running virtual machines in their data centers for at least a decade. So this is that part, the virtualization side. Yeah, they've got to move that over to the network side, out of the IT side, but it's not like they don't have the skills in their company. The challenge is going to be more, and where the trust more than anything else has to kick in, is the orchestration. Letting the software make a decision around changing the components in the network, changing the configuration of the network automatically. That's going to be the biggest cultural change.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know you guys have been doing a lot of work in the orchestration level as well, and that's a big part of this, because you're right. It's going to be not just a matter of the software, perhaps making decisions on the fly for the network, but there's also going to be a time frame where there's going to be a lot of legacy equipment out there as well, still operating, and there's going to be this new software working as well. And so there's going to be kind of that network orchestration layer as well, where things are going to have to kind of work together. That's going to be a bit of a challenge too, because there's probably going to be a 10, 15, 20-year period where it is going to be kind of this dual, almost like a dual network, a hybrid network working out there that's going to also have to kind of be taken into account, and operators have to be comfortable with those two sides of the network working together and working seamlessly together too.
Well, I think that's one of the bigger challenges in orchestration, is being able to work and deploy services seamlessly across a hybrid network where you have perhaps the same component running both in a legacy mode with a physical appliance and in a virtual mode with a running on a hypervisor, and the orchestrator having to be able to figure out how to deploy the service request across that mixed environment. One of the bigger challenges in orchestration.
Back to some of your earlier comments too. I mean, when it comes to looking at the big picture of where we are in terms of these deployments, is there a geographic area that's perhaps more advanced than others, or is there a certain sector that's more advanced, do you think, more than others when it comes to the telecom space, when it comes to these types of deployments, or are you seeing anything like that out there at this point?
I see it more as a individual company level rather than a geographic thing. I was 3 weeks ago, I was in Asia at the LTE Asia show, and within the same conversation, within 20 minutes, I had people talking to me about things that they were going live with, and would have paying customers on early next year. And I was having conversations with people about, their SS7 network and their intention of continuing to run on that for, 2030 was the time frame we were talking about. So, in Asia, you're talking about a real range of possibilities.
Yeah.
Here in North America, we certainly see a range of progress as well. Some companies are much more aggressive than others. I would say in general, North America is, if you were to characterize the big guys, they've all made their moves and they're all heading down the road. Some of the smaller operators are perhaps a little bit further behind.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, obviously, here in North America, at least in the U.S., obviously AT&T has been very aggressive in their announcements, been very forward. I know Verizon's been out there as well too. I guess it's got to be a benefit for you guys to kind of see operators really kind of out there and asking for what you're offering this time, as opposed to, obviously in the past, it would seem like perhaps the technology or the vendors were, trying to always be out ahead of the carriers in regards to what they needed, maybe trying to sell it to them and say, hey, you guys should really upgrade to this. This is great stuff. But it seems like with this move towards virtualization, it's really, at least the big guys are really kind of driving it and saying, hey, this is what we need. Help us do this. It's got to be great from a vendor's perspective to be able to have a ready-made business case out there, ready-made customers who want this and are just a matter of getting it out there and kind of making it work.
I think I've been in this industry 30 years, and this is the first time I've seen where the communication service providers are the ones who are pushing the envelope and are dragging the vendors behind them. Prior to this, standards have often either come from Bell Labs, which was sort of a vendor, or came from a collaboration of the vendors saying, here's the next generation of stuff. And of course, the CSPs contributed, but they weren't the ones necessarily, running out ahead and dragging the vendors behind them. When I think about the last big transition, it was the movement to SS7. And when we made the big move to SS7, That was a big transition, but it was largely driven by Bell Labs. And then the vendors, accommodating that, and off we went. And then we made the move to, more to mobile networks. But as we moved from 3G to 4G, to LTE, that was again a technology that came along at the right time. Yeah. Whereas now with NFV, the service providers got out in front. They got together. They said, "This is what we need. Come meet us there," and the vendors had to run and catch up.
Yeah, that's been interesting kind of follow, because you're right. I mean, a lot of those big operators have been very, very prominent in a lot of these standards meetings and these different organizations. I mean, they're often, highlighted as the main, main members, original members of a lot of these organizations out there, whether it's AT&T or Telefonica or NTT Docomo or all these big guys. And yeah, they want to have a say in what's happening out there. So it does seem like it's helped the whole community kind of really push the development time of this as well, kind of get it out there a lot quicker. So seems we're working pretty well there. Well, I guess as you look, maybe looking ahead over the next 6 to 12 months, I guess what challenge do you see out there in the market that's perhaps going to, maybe cause some pause or maybe that needs to be, be tackled in terms of the continuing to kind of evolve the deployment and development of NFV and SDN in terms of a telecom operator space?
Well, I mean, with every initiative, every big swing in the industry, there's always the hyped curve. The infamous, this is going to solve world hunger, to the trough of disillusionment, this won't be good for anything, and then you sort of work your way back to a pragmatic reality.
Yeah.
And as an industry, I'm not sure I can characterize it that way, but I think individual companies are at various points along that cycle. And so I think we'll have some trough of disillusionment that comes out where people are, acting very skeptical about it. And then we'll have a few breakthrough examples where service providers can point to things that are actually generating, profitable businesses for them, businesses that perhaps they couldn't have been in previously. And now all of a sudden they're in this new space, and we begin to see the reality. If I were to characterize where we are more than anything else, we were chatting about this at a recent NFV-SDN conference in Germany. The conference had moved from everybody talking about how cool this was and how we were heading down just sort of this, hype cycle, to a very pragmatic conversation. And, pragmatic was the word that kept being used over and over again as we talked about things, was just people were just getting very practical and working their way through the problems, working their way to the next step. And I think that's what we're going to see for the next 6 to 12 months is, really a pragmatic NFV.
That's a good point. Yeah, and it does seem like too that we're still at the stage where it's a lot of the people who are actually working on the technology itself still being able to work together, where it's not the marketing or the legal departments or other departments getting involved. I mean, it's it still seems like it's the people who want to see this really progress and don't care so much about the outside influence. They just want to see it work. So it seems like it's still at this point we've got people working on this who don't necessarily look at the name on the shirt and say, who do you work for? Who do you work for? Can I talk to you? Can I not talk to you? It seems like at this point, people are still open to talking about this just as a general, just getting this thing down, just getting this thing moving, really. And that seems like that's helping continue the momentum, at least to 2015. It seems like a big part of this.
I think it's been in part because the vendors have been following the CSPs, going back to your earlier question. When the CSPs are out in front and they're saying, hey, you and you need to work together to make this happen, the vendors tend to listen. And, we certainly see that in a lot of our early deployments, that where we're, working with people that we perhaps don't normally partner with. But, this is what the customer wants. So we all, figure out how to get together and make something work so it works out, for the customer. But it also helps advance the entire cause.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, I guess maybe looking towards, we're almost at the end of 2015 here, a few more months to go. I guess we're looking to 2016. What do you think 2016 will be? What should we expect, at least in terms of the development and the continued deployments of NFV and SDN? Do you think 2016 is going to be a year we start to see just broader deployments, or what's your general view of what we might see over the next 12, 14, 16 months now?
I think we'll start to see revenue more than anything else. As far as I know, nobody is making any money today on an NFV deployment. And that will change in the early part of next year. And over the course of 2016, I think what you'll hear and C are comm service providers moving from trials to revenue generating services, and we'll start to have the conversations around business cases and how to make all of this work. It's been 15 was a fun year, and I think 16 will be even more.
Well, that'll do it for this week's NFV-SDN Reality Check. I want to again thank my guest, Chris King from Oracle, for providing such great insight on the topic of NFV and orchestration. And again, make sure to check us out again next week, and thanks for watching.
NFV-SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV-SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.